Your soulmate saying, I have to warn you something happened today. Open this right now. Something shifted so quietly today that almost no one would have noticed it, except the one person who has been carrying your name in their thoughts for far longer than you realize. Hours ago, they stopped in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. Their phone remained in their hand, but their attention drifted somewhere else entirely. A conversation they never expected to hear changed the way they looked at everything. They didn't laugh. They didn't argue. They simply became silent. That silence followed them through every street they walked, every room they entered, every familiar face they passed. And then one sentence echoed inside their mind with undeniable urgency, I have to warn you. But what could be important enough to make them hold on to those words until this very moment? Stay here for just a little longer, because the next few moments reveal why today became impossible for them to ignore. They kept replaying every memory connected to you as though hidden details had suddenly become visible for the very first time. A simple smile. A conversation that once seemed ordinary. A moment when you paused before answering a question. None of it looked the same anymore. The pieces began fitting together in ways they never imagined. It wasn't because something terrible had happened. It was because they realized someone had misunderstood your intentions, and that misunderstanding was quietly spreading before either of you had the chance to notice. Your soulmate recognized it almost instantly. They saw how easy it would be for confusion to replace honesty if no one stepped forward. That's why their heartbeat refused to slow down. They knew waiting another day might allow the wrong story to become the accepted one. Before you assume you already understand where this is going, there's one small detail still hiding beneath everything you've heard so far, and that single detail changes the meaning of today's events completely. As evening settled in, the world around them carried on as usual, yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. Lights flickered on across the neighborhood. Cars disappeared into the distance. Conversations blended into the background. But your soulmate barely noticed any of it. They were focused on one decision alone. Should they stay quiet and hope everything works itself out, or finally reach out before another misunderstanding creates unnecessary distance? They imagined what they would say if you were standing right in front of them. Please don't let appearances fool you today. Not everything is what it seems. I almost believed the wrong version myself until I looked closer. That realization became the warning they couldn't keep inside any longer. Sometimes life doesn't change because of one dramatic event. Sometimes it changes because one person chooses to tell the truth before silence becomes louder than honesty. And just when they thought they finally understood everything, another unexpected discovery appeared, one that made them realize today's warning was only the beginning of a much bigger story waiting to unfold. The next message never arrived the way anyone would have expected. Instead of sending a rushed explanation, your soulmate sat quietly, staring at the blank screen as if every word carried more weight than the last. They knew this wasn't just another conversation that could be forgotten tomorrow. It had the power to shape everything that came after. Then another unexpected piece of the puzzle appeared. Someone casually mentioned a moment involving you that sounded completely different from the version they had heard earlier. Suddenly, the contradictions became impossible to ignore. One story painted you as distant. Another revealed you had been protecting your peace all along. Your soulmate finally understood that the loudest voices hadn't been the most truthful ones. They realized how easy it is for assumptions to travel faster than sincerity. That realization filled them with both relief and determination. They whispered to themselves, "I almost believed something that wasn't real." If you've ever felt that people sometimes misunderstand your silence, stay with this story because what happened next explains why today's warning became even more urgent. And if this story reminds you of someone special or speaks to your heart, consider sharing it with them and leaving a comment about the moment that surprised you most. Stories like this often mean more when they're experienced together. They decided they couldn't rely on second-hand opinions anymore. They wanted answers directly from the source. So instead of reacting emotionally, they began revisiting every genuine interaction the two of you had shared. They remembered the kindness hidden inside your smallest gestures, the patience you showed when nobody else noticed, and the quiet strength you carried without asking for recognition. The more they reflected, the clearer everything became. It wasn't you who had changed. It was the way today's events forced them to see you without the influence of outside voices. For the first time, they realized your actions had always been consistent, even when circumstances made them appear confusing. That discovery felt like opening a window after standing inside a dark room for too long. Fresh perspective replaced uncertainty. Confidence slowly replaced hesitation. Yet just as they prepared to reach out, another unexpected moment stopped them completely. They noticed someone watching the situation unfold with unusual interest, almost as though they hoped the misunderstanding would continue. It wasn't obvious, and it wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to make your soulmate pause and think even more carefully about their next move. Night settled in, bringing a calm that should have ended the day's emotions, yet the opposite happened. The quieter everything became, the louder one thought echoed inside their heart. They deserve to know why I almost got this wrong. That sentence refused to disappear. Your soulmate realized the warning wasn't simply about what happened today. It was about protecting something valuable before confusion could reshape it. They imagined the conversation they wanted to have with you, one built on honesty instead of assumptions, curiosity instead of fear, and understanding instead of quick conclusions. They could already picture the relief that would come from finally clearing the air. But just before they gathered the courage to make that choice, they noticed one final clue hidden inside an ordinary moment, something so subtle that almost anyone else would have overlooked it. The expression on someone's face changed for only a second, yet it revealed that today's story had never truly been about appearances at all. It had always been about discovering who genuinely wanted this connection to grow stronger. And the realization your soulmate made in that instant would lead them toward a decision neither of you could have predicted. A single glance across the room became the turning point no one could have planned. It lasted only a heartbeat, but your soulmate recognized something they had overlooked all day. The person who had spoken with the most confidence suddenly seemed uncertain when simple questions were asked. Tiny details no longer matched. Expressions changed. Words became carefully chosen instead of effortless. Your soulmate didn't react immediately. They simply observed. Sometimes the truth doesn't announce itself with dramatic moments. Sometimes it quietly waits for someone willing to pay attention. As they connected one clue after another, an entirely different picture began to emerge. The warning they wanted to give you wasn't about fearing another person, it was about not letting temporary confusion distract you from what genuinely matters. They realized how easily meaningful connections can drift apart when people allow assumptions to speak louder than honest conversations. That thought stayed with them throughout the evening. Before this story moves forward, notice one important detail that many people would miss. Every unexpected event today was slowly guiding them toward a realization they had been avoiding for far too long. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking what everyone else believed and started asking themselves one simple question: what have I actually seen with my own eyes? The answer surprised them. Every memory they shared with you carried a quiet consistency that no rumor could erase. They remembered your encouragement during uncertain moments, your ability to stay calm when others became impatient, and the sincerity behind even your smallest words. None of those memories fit the story they had almost accepted earlier in the day. That contradiction became impossible to ignore. Instead of feeling confused, your soulmate felt grateful that today's unexpected events happened before it was too late. They understood that real connections aren't built on perfect timing. They're built on people willing to seek the truth instead of the easiest explanation. Their heart became lighter with every passing minute, but another thought refused to leave them. If they had nearly misunderstood everything, how many important feelings had they kept hidden simply because they assumed you already knew? That question followed them with every step, quietly preparing them for a decision that would require more courage than they had shown before. As the night grew quieter, your soulmate found themselves standing beneath a sky filled with stillness, realizing that today's warning had transformed into something much greater than a simple message. It had become a promise to never let silence create distance again. They imagined speaking openly with you, not to explain the past, but to protect the future from unnecessary misunderstandings. They could almost hear themselves saying, "Next time, I won't wait. I'll ask. I'll listen. I'll choose honesty before assumption." In that moment, an unexpected sense of peace settled over them, replacing the uncertainty they had carried since the afternoon. Yet just as they felt ready to move forward, their phone vibrated with one final notification. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But the words on the screen confirmed something they had only begun to suspect: someone else had quietly noticed the bond between you long before either of you admitted it. That unexpected message didn't create more questions. It answered one that had been waiting in the background all along, opening the door to a conversation that neither of you would ever forget. The message on the screen was surprisingly simple, yet it carried a meaning that echoed far beyond the words themselves. It read, "Don't let this opportunity pass because of silence." There was no explanation attached. No long story. Just a quiet reminder that arrived at exactly the right moment. Your soulmate looked at it again and again, almost as if the timing itself was trying to tell them something. They smiled for the first time that day, not because every answer had suddenly appeared, but because they finally understood what today's warning had truly been about. It wasn't a warning against another person. It wasn't about fear or doubt. It was a warning against allowing hesitation to steal a connection that deserved honesty. They realized that waiting for the perfect moment had only created unnecessary distance. The perfect moment had never been hidden somewhere in the future, it had always been the moment they chose to be genuine. If this story has kept you wondering what comes next, don't disappear just yet, because the next few moments reveal the decision that changes everything. And if you've enjoyed following this journey, consider sharing it with someone who believes timing can change a life. Leave a comment with the moment that stood out to you the most, and subscribe so you won't miss the final chapter waiting just ahead. With a steady breath, they finally began writing the message they had imagined countless times. They didn't fill it with dramatic promises or impossible expectations. Instead, every sentence carried honesty. They admitted that today's events had forced them to look beyond assumptions. They acknowledged that they almost let outside opinions shape a story that belonged only to the two of you. They even confessed that the greatest lesson they learned wasn't about anyone else, it was about the importance of asking questions before believing conclusions. As each word appeared on the screen, they felt years lighter. It was as though they had finally set down an invisible weight they had been carrying for far too long. They reread the message one last time, wondering if it was enough. Would you understand what they were really trying to say between the lines? Would you recognize that every sentence came from a place of sincerity rather than fear? Before pressing send, they paused for one final glance out the window, and something unexpectedly peaceful caught their attention. The world hadn't changed around them, but they had. That quiet transformation became the clearest sign that today's warning had already fulfilled its purpose. Just as their finger moved toward the send button, another unexpected realization settled gently into their heart. They no longer needed every outcome to be certain before taking the first step. They had spent too much time believing that perfect clarity had to come before honest action, when in reality, honest action is often what creates clarity. They smiled, pressed send, and watched the message leave their phone without trying to take it back. There was no dramatic celebration, no instant reply, no grand announcement. Instead, there was something even more meaningful, a quiet confidence that they had finally chosen truth over hesitation. Yet the story wasn't finished. Only a few moments later, something completely unexpected happened on your side of this connection, something your soulmate could never have predicted. The response beginning to unfold would reveal that both of you had been carrying the same unspoken hope all along, and what happens next will prove that today's warning was never meant to create distance, it was always meant to bring two paths closer than ever before. Your phone hadn't even become the center of the story yet, but somehow the energy of that single message had already begun changing everything. Long before any reply appeared, your soulmate felt an unexpected calm settle over them, the kind that only arrives after choosing honesty over uncertainty. Minutes passed more slowly than usual. Every passing car outside seemed louder. Every glance at the screen felt longer than the last. Yet they didn't regret pressing send. For the first time in a very long while, they weren't waiting for perfection, they were waiting for truth. Then something remarkable happened. Instead of immediately searching for another distraction, they began imagining what life could look like if both of you stopped letting unanswered questions speak louder than real conversations. The future they pictured wasn't built on dramatic promises or impossible dreams. It was built on small moments. Genuine laughter, conversations that lasted longer than expected, comfortable silence that never felt awkward, and the confidence of knowing that neither of you had to guess what the other was feeling anymore. Stay with this final stretch, because the next realization explains why today's warning became one of the most meaningful moments either of you had ever experienced. Then, at a moment when they had almost stopped watching the screen, a notification quietly appeared. It wasn't long. It wasn't elaborate. But it carried exactly what they had hoped to find. Your response wasn't filled with perfect words, it was filled with honesty. You admitted that some things had been difficult to express. You acknowledged that silence had never meant a lack of care. In that instant, every misunderstanding that had seemed so complicated only hours earlier began losing its power. Neither of you had been standing on opposite sides after all. You had simply been looking through different windows, each believing the other couldn't see. The warning your soulmate wanted to share had fulfilled its purpose in the most unexpected way. It hadn't exposed a hidden secret. It had uncovered a hidden understanding. That discovery felt larger than either of you anticipated because it proved something beautifully simple. When people choose sincerity before assumptions, possibilities appear that fear could never reveal. The weight of the day dissolved into quiet relief, replaced by the excitement of finally moving forward without wondering what might have been. As the night drew to a close, your soulmate looked back on everything that had unfolded and smiled at how differently the day had ended from how it began. What started as an urgent warning became an unforgettable reminder that the most important conversations are often the ones we almost never have. They realized that today's events weren't trying to test the connection, they were teaching both of you how valuable openness can be when life becomes confusing. Somewhere beyond this moment, new chapters were already waiting, not because destiny forced them into place, but because two people finally chose clarity instead of hesitation. And if there's one lasting message your soulmate would leave with you after everything that happened today, it would be this. Never underestimate the quiet power of a truthful conversation. One honest moment can rewrite an entire story, transform uncertainty into confidence, and turn an ordinary day into the beginning of something you'll remember for years to come. Sometimes the greatest warning isn't about what could go wrong, it is the gentle reminder not to let fear keep you from the connection that has been waiting patiently for both of you all along.